everybody. How's everybody today? I am spiritual medium and psychotherapist and an author, Kellee White. And I'm with my dear friend today.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Shirley Impellizzeri. I'm a psychologist, and I guess you can say an author too.
You've written 2 books.
Yes, I have.
You are definitely an author. And we have a new book coming out, which is going to be so exciting. My goodness. And today, everybody, we're going to be talking about, I think it's a really fascinating subject, actually. Don't you, Shirley? It's the science and the spirituality of consciousness.
Yes. So both from a spiritual standpoint and a human standpoint, because we are both on this earth, in this life.
And before we start, Shirley, I wanted to ask you, I had a traumatic brain injury and I started becoming very spiritual. My whole life changed. My whole consciousness shifted. Mm-hmm. And you've always been, to me, it seemed like you have leaned towards science. How do you put the two together for you now?
Well, I kind of didn't have a choice because my dad is an engineer. And so he taught me to think very rationally, very pragmatically. Yeah. Being a Pisces, though, my mind would just go off in never land, And, but I always knew, it was almost like a knowing that was just kind of there that I never really explored until I found you, that this wasn't it. It just didn't make sense that this was it. My logical brain said, if this was it, we would be more robotic. We wouldn't have the essence, and I'm not even talking about personality because we all have personalities, but the essence of what makes you and me different, that I just couldn't imagine that disappears after the heart stops beating. Right. So it was kind of a knowing that I just kind of kept with me.
Okay.
And it didn't get explored or expanded until, people like you started to come into my life that helped me really expand that piece.
Interesting. Well, everybody, have you ever known something before you had any logical reason to know it? And I know, Shirley, you and I've talked about this. You just had like a knowing, like when you went to my mom's office.
Yes.
You had never met my mom. You just knew you had to get to that area.
Yeah.
There's like no logical reason for so many things.
No logical reason. I just kind of went with, and it wasn't even intuition. I kind of was in a daze. I didn't even know what I was doing, but I remember I drove, stopped on the street. That's a great street. Oh, that's a cool building. And that's just how it happened.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah. But maybe everybody out there, you might have had a feeling about someone. You had a feeling about somebody, or maybe, and this has happened to me and to other people that I know, you have a dream that later unfolded in life about real life.
Yeah.
That can happen. Or maybe, and this has happened so many times, some sort of like instinct, if you will, that you take a different road. Don't go on that road, go on this road. Take a different route. Or maybe you just experience, these are just typical things, a moment that was so profound and so impossible to explain that it changed how you see life itself, which is what I will be talking about later with my traumatic brain injury. It literally changed the way I see life completely. But for thousands of years, human beings have asked the same question. Who are we? We're not our jobs. And it was so funny too, because after my head injury, I knew I wasn't my job, but you don't know until your consciousness shifts. Yeah. You're not your job. As you said earlier to me, you're not your personality. We're not our stories, but who are we underneath all of this? And for centuries, spirituality has tried to answer that question. And then, Cheryl, science entered the conversation. And now something fascinating, I think, is happening. And the two worlds are moving towards each other. So tonight we are going to explore consciousness, the brain. Shirley is here for this, the nervous system. But I will be talking about mystical experiences, near-death experiences, intuition, meditation, healing. And perhaps one of the most important questions humanity has ever asked is, what if there is more to you than your brain? So welcome to Psychology and the Soul, everybody.
Yeah, it's interesting how neuroscience and spirituality interact, and they're getting that way. The study of quantum physics is really starting to have a scientific base that this is not the only dimension that exists. and they're really starting to explore that, you know. So this isn't, so much to convince anybody of anything that they don't believe in, or not to tell you what you believe, just kind of to explore, to have a curiosity about what might be out there, to examine the science of discovering, what people have reported for centuries. And of course, we learn different things. Almost every century, we learn different things because there are more studies. Right. And, it's kind of, I love this topic because it's where brain science, consciousness, and spiritual experience collide. And that's exactly why we do this show, because it's all part of who we are.
Absolutely. So let's begin with the question that sits underneath this entire conversation. Does consciousness create the brain, or does the brain create consciousness? But for most of modern history, we have assumed that consciousness is simply produced by the brain. But today there are some researchers that are beginning to ask whether consciousness may be more fundamental than we once thought. So Shirley, why is this such a difficult question for science?
Well, because science measures observable phenomena, and that's all that science can talk about, is what's observed, but consciousness is a subjective experience. So it's so personal, consciousness is a state of being awake, aware of your surroundings, able to perceive your own thoughts, your feelings, your experiences. And that can't necessarily be measured by science.
Right.
We can observe brain activity, but we cannot directly observe awareness of ourselves.
And you make a good point with that, because we can measure brain activity.
Right. So, truly consciousness still remains one of neuroscience's greatest unsolved mysteries.
So true. And I remember when I was after my head injury and I was seeing a neuropsychiatrist, actually, who did all the brain testing. And he was fascinated by what was happening with me, because he had a curiosity about it, which was great. But isn't it fascinating that despite all of our advances, we still don't fully understand where awareness itself comes from? So it's not thought and not memory, just awareness, the experience of being alive. So what if consciousness is not something you have, but what if consciousness is something that you are participating in?
Well, that's a really important way of saying it, because being aware is tuning in. That's why the connection between brain and body is so important. Awareness doesn't just come from the brain, because there's a lot of things that we have to, just as an adaptive strategy, push into, repress or push into the unconscious. So the way to awareness is to connect, because the body holds everything. The body remembers what the mind forgets.
Right. So true. And I think one of the most exciting discoveries in neuroscience is neuroplasticity. So, and I'm going to have you explain that in a minute, but for years, people have believed I am who I am, or my brain is wired that way. My trauma defines me. Oh my gosh. I hear that probably pretty much every day. But science says otherwise.
Yeah.
So what is neuroplasticity?
Again, we develop as we go along. We only know what we know, right? So remember that term, you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Yes.
Well, we now know it was a lie. You can. Rewiring the brain means that you start to make other connections in the brain that weren't there because of lack of experience. So, for example, we have a negativity bias, which means that the brain will remember everything negative because that's what saved our lives. We had to remember that is the cave that was dangerous, that killed my buddy. That's the cave we all had fun in, but who cares about that? This one, knowing this one and keeping this one in mind is going to save my life, because that's where the bears live. That's where, so we all have that. And so, especially when we come from a lot of trauma and a lot of more negative experiences, for lack of a better way to say it, it starts to really get ingrained.
Mm-hmm.
And neuroplasticity, the brain connections are kind of like, you compare them to like snow. When it's first powdered snow, how it's very soft, and you start to ski, and you ski in the same place, and all of a sudden underneath it becomes rock hard.
Yes.
So snow from powder becomes rock hard. That's the same thing that happens to our neurons. So a connection that has a lot of practice, that's made over and over and over again, becomes very, strong.
Mm-hmm.
So what we need to do is really incorporate and notice and be aware of experiences that are the opposite of that. Mm-hmm. So what I always share with my patients to start balancing it out is not to just to notice, oh, my favorite song came on. Oh, great. To really anchor it. That's my favorite song. How does that song feel in my body? When we take it to the body, we're anchoring it. And what we're doing in the brain is all of a sudden this negativity bias stops working, and we're stimulating a different part of the brain.
A new neural pathway.
New neural pathway. Exactly. And every time we do that, we're shutting this down and stimulating the other.
Right.
And so the more we do it, the more balanced the brain can become. But we have to do it very consciously and very purposefully. There's a wonderful book, The Buddha Brain, by Dr. Rick Hanson, that teaches people how to do that. You have to be very conscious to do it, because it doesn't come naturally because of the negativity bias.
Right.
But that's a wonderful way to start to shift and start to rewire your brain. Now, of course, the older we get, the more experiences we have. It takes a while. It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I love this, Shirley, because spirituality is what we talk about as transformation. And so science now says that transformation isn't just emotional, it's biological. So you're healing literally. When you heal, you literally change your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And I can absolutely tell you that what happened to me, I mean, my mindset, my awareness, my brain, because I had a brain scan 3 years before my traumatic brain injury. How fortuitous. So I had my first brain scan 3 years before I had my head injury.
How wonderful. You had a baseline.
I had a baseline. So I had the first was in 1997, and then my head injury was in 2000. Mm-hmm. So, or maybe it was 98. Head injury was 2000, but I had the first brain scan of many, may I say, in 2001. And what a difference, because the doctor and my personal awareness was, why am I even having this brain scan? Somebody tells me I'm ADD, and so I need to have a brain scan. Oh, okay. But my awareness was very limited to, I work, I was a single mother. That was like my consciousness, my awareness was very different. And then when 3 years later, when I did have my second brain scan, due to the fact that my whole behavior began to change, and the doctor was able to look at both, and it was unbelievable. He just couldn't believe what had happened, because it was so different. And I lost a tremendous amount of, memory and all kinds of things, and talk about neural pathways that had to change. But what the doctor observed was that my consciousness started to shift. Everything started to shift. There was so much more to see. There was so much more to feel. There was an awareness and a consciousness shift of what was real in real life and what was real in the spiritual world.
Wow.
It really changed me dramatically. And talk about neural pathways that had to be formed. But one of the things that, it changed my everything, my intuition, my awareness, my perspective changed. We could never go back to where it was before.
So what you're saying is you became aware of this realm that you didn't know existed?
Yes. Yeah. And nobody was going to change my mind. I know exactly what I was seeing, and exactly what the feeling was, exactly what the awareness was, and how limited. And you'll notice I always use this word with James often. James and I've talked about this when describing certain people. I'll say they're limited. And I don't mean it in a judgmental way. They're limited currently where they are. Whatever their belief system or whatever their consciousness is, it's limited. Does that mean it could change? Of course.
Right.
It could. It does take, without a head injury, and that was a lot of work to do, by the way.
Yeah.
It wasn't like kabang, oh, here I go. Believe me, it was a whole journey there.
Yeah.
But for many people, let's say they start reading the Buddha Brain, like you had said. I remember when you gave me the copy of that book. It's a very good read for that. But once you start becoming conscious of maybe there's something greater than this, you would start to form some neural pathways that would be different here.
Oh, that would be more expansive. That wouldn't be so narrow.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So of course my left brain has a curiosity.
Okay, Cheryl, you go.
Maybe others out there have it too, is when you started to kind of come into this consciousness, is it something that you could see? Is it something that you felt?
It was all of the above. So first, initially, I was seeing dead people everywhere. So that was the first big hope. Hello, welcome to your new consciousness. That was the first part. But also at the same time, I suddenly knew so much. And I knew that this earth was one place, but that it was certainly not all of it. There was so much more to the reason we came to life, the reason we're here. There was so much more. And I knew it not just intuitively, it was everything for me. I mean, I really got a giant dose of a different consciousness. In fact, so much so, Shirley, I could never go back to the old consciousness. It's too antiquated.
Yeah. Well, once you know, you can't unknow.
You can't unsee. Once you know something, you just cannot.
Yeah.
You can't go back.
You can't go back. So and the other was just a deep knowing inside.
Oh, yes. It was a deep knowing from experience of things that I have seen. Yeah, it was a deep knowing. And again, I lost a lot of memory, probably 20 years from what we kind of figured. Wow. A chunk. I mean, it was kind of a, mixed bag there. I didn't need so much memory. So that's why it was like I had to go to a high school reunion, and my mom was like trying to prep me on going to this reunion. And I'm like, it's not going to help. It's just gone.
That's
I missed a lot of things. But what was happening is that I couldn't inhale books a lot fast enough. And I mean spiritual books, and hence all the books behind me. I couldn't inhale them enough fast enough, because my consciousness was shifting so quickly. My awareness and my consciousness, I had to feed the brain with everything that I was learning from.
So did you lose the memories because of the head injury, or did you lose the memories because, I don't know, because they weren't necessary anymore and this just took up so much?
I think both. I think it's a combination. Listen, I always said this, and I believe this wholeheartedly, that there was a plan for me.
Yeah.
There was a plan. And the plan was being like, look, Kelly, at this certain time, kaboom, we're going to take out the other parts you don't need. We're going to put this in for you, and it's going to be okay. And I was probably on the other side going, okay.
All right, I'll try
it, Shirley. Okay.
There's only so much real estate in the brain.
There's only so much real estate, But what I did discover is we use so little of our brain. And when I was in that inhaling information, I could not get enough information in. Everywhere I went, only thing I carried were sacks of books. And my mother would say, what do you have now? And I was like, oh, look, I'm reading this and I'm reading that. And I would read several at a time because I was inhaling information. But what I discovered is we use very little parts of our brain. I mean, really. And then if you add a lot of, not to get on a rant about this, but if you add a lot of drugs to your brain or alcohol and a lot of it, you're wasting your brain. You're wasting that opportunity.
It's so funny because one of my friends' husband said this to his kids, don't ruin the one asset you're born with.
Right.
That you don't have to pay for, and it's such an interesting way of, and everything in moderation is fine. You and I love a drink once in a while, but don't ruin that one asset that you're born with that doesn't cost you anything.
Right. That's so true.
Yeah.
And Shirley, tell me a story. Do you have a story, like a professional observation, if you will, of showing what neuroplasticity and healing can be for like one of your patients?
Yeah, I had a guy that came in that was very, very angry and had a really hard time regulating his anger, and he was very remorseful of it, but he just couldn't, he couldn't regulate his anger. So we started taking it into the body. So I would ask him to, bring up something that brought up a little bit of anger. And instead of keeping it here, we took it into the body. What did it feel like? It felt like a volcano erupting, or his chest was tight, or his tummy was tight. And we would just wait and take it. And in the office, he was able to experience that it calmed. By just tuning into it, it calmed. The more he did that, the less reactive he became. And that, in a sense, is rewiring the brain. Instead of feeling the anger, reacting to it, he noticed the anger, and the body will always feel first before the mind, is aware of it. So he would start to notice that tightness in the chest, or the, kind of revolt in his tummy. And that clued him in. And so he would take a step back. And that split second of noticing what anger feels like in your body gives you the time to take a step back, be with it, notice that it passes a little, even if it dissipates just a little, and then you're able to choose your response. And he had said, that it had happened so often now with his wife that the wife said, "What are you doing? What happened?" She was amazed that he was, and of course we're all human and it can happen once in a while,
Sure.
But the next best thing is repair, right? And so that you have to, the brain was getting rewired, because otherwise he wouldn't have been able to do it over and over again.
Yeah. So true, Shirley. That's a good one.
We would practice it every session. Every session we would practice it.
So you were forming new pathways.
Exactly.
Wow. Well, one of the things I want to talk about is meditation in this, because can meditation rewire the brain? And I'm going to say absolutely. I mean, it is exactly what happened to me. And for thousands of years, meditation has been considered spiritual, which I get, and for sure it has been. But now scientists are looking at it a little differently. And when they put people into MRI machines, they discover something remarkable, that meditation physically changes the brain. So, I mean, let me just say that when I was seeing my neurologist, he was a psychiatric neurologist for everything that had happened to me. So I had an MRI. I had brain scans, Shirley, every 6 months for years. Okay, for years. And about the second year, I started, deeply meditating, deeply. And I was trying to tell you this earlier today, Shirley. I would meditate for hours at a time, hours. I would go into listening to sound bowls or the different chakra meditations, and I could meditate for hours. And one day I went to see my doctor, and we did our usual, brain testing, brain scan. And he said to me, "Well, this is quite remarkable." He said, "Your brain is entirely in theta." He said, "What are you doing?" And I said, I am meditating 10 hours a day, 8-10 hours a day, a lot. I mean, like beyond whatever, anything normal. And he said to me, "You've got the brain of a monk." And so what's really important is that theta brainwave state does change your brain. It changes everything. And so that's during meditation, the brain, the theta is like, it's deep relaxation. And so when I was deeply relaxed, and you remember me telling you that after my head injury, where I lost everything, I lost my home, I lost my child, I lost everything, and I lost my career, I lost everything. You would think I would have been anxious out of my mind. And yet I was in a deep state of relaxation, even through the greatest of losses. It was unbelievable, actually.
Wow.
And so I would experience like visual insights. So I would also have deep creative, like problem solving or bursts of creativity. But my stress reduction was so low. And it has a lot to do with neuroplasticity, because research suggests actually that if you can go into those deep states, it can stimulate neuroplasticity and change your brain structures and emotional regulation. And I believe that is exactly what happened to me. And I had a mystical experience, but it was conditioned with deep meditation. So I'm all about going inward and meditating. Because you asked me, you said, did I have monkey mind? We were talking about. I'm like, no, never had monkey mind, never, because I just went into some state.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing that you can do that. And of course, doing it for so many hours, would help that. If I remember correctly, and it increases the gray matter.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So what happens is you go from homeostasis, which is kind of like where we live, right? Emotionally, where we live. Some people up here with depression, some people lower with, up here with anxiety, some people lower with depression. And so what happens is when you're kind of living in a calm state, it reduces the stress response because you're coming from here. You're not coming from here. So when something stressful happens and you're coming from here, it's much easier to get dysregulated. Right. But when you're coming from here, kind of as a really, truly way of being, not kind of trying to be there, but really living in that state.
It's very authentic.
Yeah. It reduces the stress response. It increases the ability for emotional regulation because you're so tuned in, you can tell what's happening. It improves your attention because you're so aware of everything. In a calm state, our awareness increases. When we're in fight or flight, our awareness is very narrow because we have to look for the threat.
Right.
And so looking too big is too dangerous, because if I'm looking over here, what if the threat happens there? So I have to be very, very narrow. And it creates in and of itself greater resilience. And it increases also compassion networks, because you don't kind of, jump into everybody's stress soup. You don't kind of take the bait. You're almost standing from a once back and you're observing. And when you observe someone having a really hard time or being very stressed, in that observation place, you can have increased compassion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's really what happened to me. I went right into deep compassion for what had happened.
Deep compassion for yourself, which is so important. All the studies show that self-compassion is so healing. And also, of course, deep compassion for others when they're going through something.
Absolutely.
Now, explain just for people, I know you mentioned it just a moment ago, but the definition of the theta state.
So the theta state is that deep kind of mental and physical relaxation, and it bridges the gap between awaking consciousness and deep sleep. So it allows the brain to access subconscious processing and intuition and vivid imagery. So entering theta during meditation has a lot of physiological benefits too. So it's not a beta state, which is where we're active and everything. It's a deep, it's like a deep almost sleep state. And yet I was wide awake.
Yeah, well, it's so interesting because in that state, it's almost like you're the observer.
Totally.
And you can just observe everything. You can observe yourself.
Yep.
The awareness. You can observe others.
Well, again, given the circumstances that I found myself in, which was pretty dire, they were pretty dire circumstances. Read my book, Cracked Open. But I was as calm as I could ever possibly be with no medication.
which is quite incredible.
But I really put that out for meditation, because meditation, again, people will say, well, can I just meditate for 5 minutes? Well, you can do whatever you want, but it does take practice. Meditation is a practice, just like everything's a practice,
Yeah.
But ancient monks didn't have brain scans, but somehow they discovered this practice, how many years ago, that modern science is just now validating. And I think that's extraordinary, Shirley. And let's talk about dreams now, because for thousands of years, dreams have been viewed as messages. Ancient cultures treated dreams as sacred. Psychology sees dreams as a window into the subconscious, and all of this is accurate. And many spiritual transitions or traditions see them as something more. So, Shirley, for your perspective, why are dreams so important?
Well, they're important because they are a window kind of into our unconscious. Like I've had people where they're, working on something that maybe kind of that we've been touching upon, but it's still kind of in the unconscious, right? And all of a sudden they'll have a dream where that's all coming up. And I said, that lets us know that you're starting to get ready to uncover what's in your unconscious.
I think dreams are so important.
Yeah, exactly. It could also help with memory consolidation, integrating memories from short-term to long-term.
Yeah.
That's what dreams can help. It can also help emotional processing. Whatever we're dealing with emotionally, that can kind of help to process. And so then it's so wonderful to be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
And to discover. It can sometimes help with problem solving.
Oh, for sure.
It comes in symbolism. It's like a symbolic communication. It's metaphors, it's words, it's gestures. There's different, schools of thought on how to interpret dreams. There's one that says we play each part of our dream.
Right.
So there's something in us in each character, for lack of a better way to say it.
I tend to use that one a lot when I interpret dreams.
Right.
Unless it's a deeply spiritual dream. Where there's have a dream of somebody who's just who's passed over. That's a visit.
Exactly. It can bring to light unsolved emotional material that you may not consciously be ready to take a look at.
Yeah. Yes, that's so true. That's so true.
Yeah. So when parts of your mind have been disconnected or suppressed or unconscious, a dream can help kind of integrate all of that. Again, when in our conscious awake state, we may not be ready for that, but it kind of starts to help, starts to say, well, maybe you are a little ready,
Exactly. It kind of nudges us on. I think you're ready. No, I'm not. Yes, I am.
Because it's so important, as we talk about consciousness and we say consciousness is everything, right? It's our spirituality, our soul. It's our humanness. It's how we think. It's our experiences. It's everything about us, in my mind, forms our consciousness, including what's unconscious. And that's the work that we do, is to help people bring what's unconscious because it was too scary, too threatening, so it gets repressed, into conscious awareness. That is the true meaning of healing. Right. Is when we can bring the unconscious into conscious awareness. That's the only way that we can do something about it.
Right.
And it really reminds me of this just brilliant, I think Carl Jung was so ahead of his time.
Totally.
I think we've mentioned this before, but until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate.
I love that quote so much.
Yeah. And it's so true because we don't know. I call it emotional autopilot. We don't know what we don't know. And we're just going along life thinking, oh, this is my lot in life. But there might be some things that are unconscious that we're not aware of. And once we bring it into conscious awareness, then we can work on it.
And all of that is part of the mystery, Cheryl. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's talk about intuition, or is it something else? Because almost everybody has experienced some form of intuition. The phone rings and you know who's calling. You think of somebody and then they text. You get a feeling that you shouldn't ignore. Science often will explain intuition as a subconscious pattern recognition. But spiritual traditions describe it differently. Can both be true, Shirley?
Well, it's so funny because I was just talking to one of my patients today. She was telling me that her mom, when the phone would ring, she knew exactly who was on the other side. And she would answer the phone. Hi, Carla. Hi, and every single time she got it right.
Wow.
And so it was tuning into the energy of who was calling. And that is intuition. That is pure intuition. I remember I went on a lecture, a talk with, I think her name was Laura Day, way back when. And she was teaching how to get in touch with your intuition. And she had something in a box, and she showed the box, and she said, as you look at the box, just tune in, and the first thing that comes to mind, just think of the first thing that comes to mind, right? And the first thing that came to mind was my daughter, Sydney. She opened the box, and it was a heart. So there was a relation to, it could be someone you love. It could, the word heart didn't come to mind, but it was a metaphor.
Yeah.
Heart. So it's something that I think we're all born with. We feel it in the gut before we know it in the mind.
Yeah.
Most everybody has experienced it. Sometimes if we're very pragmatic and very left brain thinking, we kind of ignore it and shut it down. But it's kind of we can call it from a human neurobiological standpoint, it's like nervous system awareness.
Okay.
It's kind of our implicit memory. Implicit means we're not fully aware. It's not conscious memory. Explicit memory is things we remember. Implicit memory is things that we don't. However, the body still remembers.
Right.
Right. And it really kind of developed as a survival mechanism. I'm sure in the Neanderthal days, it really saved lives where people just had an intuitive feeling not to walk that way in the jungle and to walk the other way. And maybe they didn't even know why. So it's evolutionary, and it's all, as we've said before, the brain's main goal is to keep the host alive. And so intuition, I believe, developed as a survival mechanism.
Wow. Yeah.
And we know, and when we don't follow our intuition.
Yeah. Boy. Well, and it's so interesting because what are the experiences that don't seem to fit those explanations, right? The ones that people can't explain. And to everybody out there, have you ever had an experience that science couldn't fully explain? And Shirley, how about you? Have you ever had an experience that science couldn't fully explain?
Well, many times. I mean, even how I got to your mom.
Yeah.
Science couldn't explain it. Why one day I woke up and said, drive to Beverly Hills and park on this street and look at that building and push the third floor, and ended up at a door that said psychological services. And your mom happened to be in between patients, which was extremely rare because your mom was so busy all the time.
Yeah.
And again, I was almost like, I'm aging myself, but I remember, did you remember the commercial? It was Fruit Loops commercial, and it was a coupon. Follow your nose, wherever it goes, right? I was literally almost following my nose. So I get there, I knock on the door. She happens to be in between. And I said, I'm looking for a psych assistant. I need 1,500 hours where you have to work under someone else's license. Are you accepting any psych assistants? And she goes, oh, no, honey, I'm not accepting any more psych assistants. And literally without thinking, something hits me in the back of the head. Out pop the words, but I'm trained in hypnosis.
I mean, that was just amazing.
Why would you even say that?
I have no idea.
And she said, oh, honey, I need a good hypnotist, but let's have lunch. I don't know you.
I mean, that to me is the Bashert meant to be.
Oh, absolutely.
Agreement from the other side, but you were just following it. I mean, science couldn't explain why you get up in the morning and, hey, I have to do this.
Right. Science couldn't explain what got me to do that.
Right. It's so, and if that hadn't happened, you and I would not be here having this conversation.
We would have, I mean, given what you've shared with me, that we all come in a soul group, maybe we would have met in another way. I hope so. Yeah. But yeah, had that not happened.
If there's an agreement that you are going to meet, it would have happened one way or the other way. Absolutely.
Okay.
It would have happened one way or the other way. I think this is such a unique, knowing I knew my mother so well, there was no way she would even open a door. It just wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
You know, and plus, not to mention, it's hard to find parking in Beverly Hills.
Oh, I found, yeah, exactly. And on the street that your mom was in, Bedford, it's the one, they call it the one-stop shopping. There's plastic surgeons there, psychologists there, psychiatrists there, dentists. It truly is one-stop shopping.
Yeah.
And so the meters are always packed. And all of a sudden I get there, oh, look, there's a meter. And I parked. And it happened to be across the street, because there's a lot of buildings on that street.
Yeah.
Across the street from the building that your mom was in.
It's unbelievable story, Shirley. So let's talk about near-death experiences, because few topics, our assumptions have challenge us more than near-death experiences. So people will describe seeing their deceased loved ones, profound peace, life reviews, encounters with light, a loss of fear of surrounding death. And regardless what somebody believes, the transformational effects of that really are undeniable. And I had one early on in life, and I was very clear that the energy there on that side was very different. I was very depressed, actually, when I came back.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's what a lot of people say, myself included. I didn't have a near-death experience, but I remember I went into this deep meditation. It was a breath work.
Okay.
And I've done this maybe just a handful of times where I go so deep, and I went so deep and I literally crossed to the other side. And it just felt so incredibly lovely and just full of love. It's almost like you're not just surrounded by love, but it's within you and outside of you. Yeah. And it's such a beautiful, incredibly safe, calming feeling.
Yeah.
That I remember when it was time to come back, I started to cry. I didn't want to come back.
Right. And that's so true.
Yeah.
Of how that is. I mean, often when you do have a near-death experience, sometimes you have no choice. They will send you back. Yeah. It's like, okay, all right, here, you got to go now. But there was a real recent story that really captured a lot of the public's attention. And that was when actor Jeremy Renner, do you remember Jeremy Renner? Oh my God, he's such a good actor. And in fact, Dawn and I were watching one of his shows. It was just so good. But he had a near-death experience by being crushed by a snowplow in 2023. I think it was like in a Lake Tahoe area or Reno or in that area.
Wow.
So Jeremy has actually spoken openly about what happened and how the experience changed him. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting isn't just surviving something that was catastrophic. It's what happened afterwards. And like many people have had these near-death experiences, he described a shift in perspective. And that's really what happened. There is a deeper appreciation for life. And maybe it's what you said about earlier, Shirley, there's a compassion that comes along with this, but there is a stronger sense of connection, a different understanding of what truly matters and what doesn't matter. And Jeremy, if you're listening, we would love to have you on our show.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also a neuroscience. I can't remember his first name, but Dr. Eben.
Oh yeah, Alexander Eben,
who wrote a book on it. And of course, the neuroscience is very left brain thinking and stuff, and had a surgery that and he came back and wrote a book on it because he couldn't believe it changes perspectives. It changes priorities.
It changes your belief system.
Exactly. And I think one of the most profound things that it changes is, you don't have a fear of death. It reduces your fear of death. Now, our fear of death is kind of automatic without thought. It's the primitive part of the brain. We come to threat and we immediately react because, again, the brain's job is to save the species. However, in general, when you're not in that moment where something happens, you're under threat and you respond. In general, it really reduces the fear of death. So it has a huge psychological impact.
Yeah. And it changes your identity and it changes your priorities.
Yeah, absolutely.
You do things so differently. It helps you with a greater purpose of life.
Mm-hmm.
you know, all of those things. But what fascinates me is that people often return less afraid, right? When we were saying, and more alive, more alive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It increases your spirituality because you realize there's more to life than this. You know,
Oh, yes.
not necessarily when we talk about spirituality, not necessarily religion, although some religions can be very spiritual, but spirituality, you know, and a greater life purpose.
Right, right. Well,
You know?
and whether you view that kind of an experience as a neurological experience or a psychological experience or a spiritual experience or all three, the transformation is undeniable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would venture to guess, and I don't know, you know, if there's studies on it, but I would venture to guess that it changes your brain, that it rewires your brain probably almost automatically because the change is so profound.
Yeah. Boy, Shirley, I bet you're right. Wow. Let's talk about psychedelics and healing in consciousness. Now, a conversation that was once taboo is happening now in research institutions around the world. Psychedelic assisted therapy. Shirley, you know a lot more about this than I do.
Well, I'm not trained in it, and it doesn't feel like the path for me.
Okay.
So I'm not interested in being trained in it. What I do know is that the reason why psychedelics work is because it kind of shuts down the thinking brain. And so you can go right into kind of the trauma without stopping it, without defending, without rationalizing it. And there can be, done well, there can be a lot of healing, because what happens in trauma is the experience becomes disintegrated. You know, the feeling of it can be lodged in the body, and the story of it you can talk about like you're reciting, you know, a recipe without any feeling.
Wow.
Or the other way around. The story of it you don't know, but you walk into a blue room and you start to dysregulate and you don't understand why. And it's because that's where the trauma happened. You know, the room was blue, right? So what it does is it kind of pulls the thinking part of the brain out of the way so the work can be done and there can be integration. And that is what healing is to integrate these memories, you know, integrate these traumatic events.
Right. You know, what's so interesting to me is that it's not just symptom relief, but many people describe those experiences with psychedelic medication is deeply spiritual.
Right. Well, because you kind of also realize that there's so much more than your experience.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
You know, there's so much more than just that experience.
Some of the way people have described it to me is some of the things that I saw during my heyday of my head injury. You know, so for me, I would not want to do that. It's not my thing. It just isn't. I've had that great awakening of all of it. I'm like, yeah, no, I don't want to induce that, but it is very helpful for some people.
Yeah, it really is. However, I would really caution to do it in a very, very responsible way. The most important thing is to do it one-on-one.
Right.
I would not advise people, you know, the people that do ayahuasca with a big group of 50 people and stuff, because if the medicine takes you into the eye of the trauma and you don't have someone there that can be with you, that can help you have a corrective experience, you're just sitting there for 8 hours in your trauma.
Right, right.
And I find that very irresponsible. I had an experience like that.
Did you?
Yeah. And for the longest time, because, you know, I'll try most everything once. And so when I heard about this, it was a group of, you know, a professor from UCLA, 15 people, rented a house in Palm Springs. And I find the energy in Palm Springs so calming. And the shaman was this beautiful, wonderful girl that came from, you know, a generation of shamans from Peru. So she was lovely. But it was 15 people and I'm not one to ask for help. So I'm in my own trauma and there's no one there. So I'm left alone in it again.
Oh my gosh. Sure.
So it needs to be, I highly recommend one-on-one, because if she was there working with me, solely working with me, that would have been a corrective experience. You know?
Yeah.
what happened is it kind of freaked me out. And for the longest time, I couldn't meditate. I couldn't go in because it felt too scary. Now, my therapist gave me this wonderful reframe, which I just love so much. She said, now the mind knows what the body went through.
Oh, what a great reframe.
It was such a wonderful reframe. So I highly recommend, if you're going to do this, well, the research shows that it can be really, really helpful, and it does reduce PTSD symptoms, to do it one-on-one with someone who's been recommended, who you can trust, who's very well studied in it.
Right. Because I totally agree with you, Shirley. It has the ability to really shift your consciousness from staying stuck in a trauma position to, moving forward. I've witnessed so many of my clients have had that experience, but what you're saying is very important. I mean, know thyself before you go in.
Exactly. And trauma happens relationally. In relation to someone else, and so healing happens in relation to someone else.
Yes. Oh gosh, Shirley, I love that you said that.
Yeah.
And before we end tonight, everybody, I want to, let everybody know that Shirley and I have a class, upcoming class this Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. It's about a 2-hour class, and it's going to be very inclusive and inquisitive, and it's about personality disorders. It's about why do people act the way they do, and we're going to be talking about awareness, how to regulate yourself. You'll walk away with a deeper understanding of your emotional patterns, and quite possibly what everybody else's emotional patterns are as well. So we'll be talking about personality disorders, how to navigate that road, because it could be a very intense road, but because we have a smaller group, we will be able to answer everybody's questions. Your personal story will be right there, but having 2 therapists right there.
And we wanted to do it very interactive, so it's going to be a conversation, and you really leave with tools on how to, if you're dealing with someone with a personality disorder, whether it's a parent, a spouse, a friend, a coworker. Really, really concrete tools on how to respond so you don't get in that soup with them. Because it can be exhausting and so stressful.
Oh my gosh. I mean, so if you are in this situation, or if you know somebody that is, join our class. It's this Saturday. If you purchase the class, and you can get that on kelleewhite.com. If you purchase the class, you will be, and you can't watch it live, then you can watch it certainly at any other time. But it's going to be a really, it's a deep class, and it's, we're going to give you guys a lot of information and a lot of help for some of the situations that you may find yourself in.
It's at 9 o'clock Pacific Standard Time.
And it's about 2 hours. So it's just going to be us at kelleewhite.com/events. So thank you, Shirley, for joining me tonight. I'm so excited that you're here tonight. And everybody, I look forward to seeing everybody on my Thursday class, Ask Me Anything. And before I forget, I still have some sessions available for this Thursday and Friday. So if you'd like to have a session with me, please go to my website, kelleewhite.com. All right. So take care, everybody. Have a great week.
Take care. Bye-bye.